Top React.js interview question and answers. This is part 2 of 3. Hey amazing viewers! We're thrilled to share that part 2 of our React.js interview questions and answers series is now live. If you haven't had a chance to watch part 1 yet, we recommend checking it out first for a comprehensive understanding. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and let's unravel the secrets of React.js success together. What are React hooks dependencies and how do they affect the behavior of a hook? Answer: in React hooks, dependencies are an array of values provided as the second argument to hooks like useEffect or useCallback. These dependencies determine when the hook should be re-executed. If the dependencies change between renders, the hook will be invoked again. Understanding and correctly managing dependencies is crucial to prevent issues like stale closures or unnecessary re-renders. Explain the concept of suspense in React. Answer: suspense is a feature in React that enables components to suspend rendering while waiting for some asynchronous operation to complete, such as data fetching or code splitting. It allows components to show fallback content while the data or code is being loaded. Suspense is particularly useful in improving the user experience for async operations in React applications. What is the significance of the useImperative handle hook in React? Answer: the useImperative handle hook is used to customize the instance value that is exposed when using react.forwardRef. It takes a ref object and a callback function that should return the value to be exposed. This is helpful when you want the parent component to interact with the child component's instance, controlling what methods or properties are accessible externally. Explain the concept of render props in React. Answer: render props is a pattern in React where a component receives a function as a prop, and that function is responsible for rendering the UI. This allows components to share code and logic without the need for higher-order components or complex inheritance. It's a flexible pattern commonly used in scenarios where components need to share behavior or state. What are the differences between controlled and uncontrolled components in React forms? Answer: controlled components. In controlled components, form elements like inputs or selects are bound to the component state. The state is then updated through a change handler, and the component re-renders with the new state. This approach provides a single source of truth for form data. Uncontrolled components. In uncontrolled components, form elements do not rely on React state. Instead, the DM handles the form data and you retrieve it using refs. Uncontrolled components are often used when integrating React with non-React code or when simpler forms are sufficient. What is the purpose of the react.memo function? Answer: react.memo is a higher-order component that memoizes the rendering of a functional component. It prevents unnecessary renders by caching the result and reusing it when the component's props remain the same. This can significantly improve performance in scenarios where components receive the same props multiple times. Explain the concept of higher-order components, hooks, versus render props. Answer: higher-order components. Hooks are functions that take a component and return a new component with additional functionality. They are a way to reuse component logic, but they introduce an additional wrapper component. Hooks are a pattern from the early days of React. Render props. Render props involve passing a function as a prop to a component, allowing that component to share some code or logic. Unlike hooks, render props do not introduce an additional wrapper component. This pattern is often considered more flexible and readable than hooks. What are React hooks rules? Answer: React hooks rules are a set of conventions to ensure the correct usage of hooks in functional components. The primary rules include: only call hooks at the top level. Hooks should not be called inside loops, conditions, or nested functions. They should always be called at the top level of a functional component. Only call hooks from React functions. Hooks should only be called within the body of React functional components or custom hooks. Explain the purpose of the useLayoutEffect hook. Answer: the useLayoutEffect hook is similar to useEffect but fires synchronously after all DM mutations. It is often used when you need to perform measurements or manipulate the DM in response to changes before the browser paints. While it has a similar API to useEffect, it runs synchronously, making it useful for scenarios that require immediate access to the DM. What is the role of the react.createContext function? Answer: react.createContext is a function that creates a context object in React. This context object includes a provider component and a consumer component. Context is used to pass data down the component tree without manually passing props at every level. It's particularly useful for global state management or sharing data between components that are not directly connected in the component tree. Explain the significance of React DevTools. Answer: React DevTools is a browser extension and a standalone tool that allows developers to inspect and debug React component hierarchies in their applications. It provides a visual representation of the component tree, allows inspection of component props in state, and facilitates tracking component updates. React DevTools is a powerful tool for debugging and optimizing React applications during development. What is the purpose of the useTransition hook in React? Answer: the useTransition hook is part of the React Concurrent Mode API and is used to enable smooth transitions when rendering asynchronous updates. It returns a set of transition functions that can be used to animate the mounting or unmounting of components. This hook is particularly useful when dealing with asynchronous data fetching or other operations that may cause components to appear or disappear. Explain the concept of React error boundaries. Answer: React error boundaries are special components that catch JavaScript errors anywhere in their component tree, log those errors, and display a fallback UI instead of crashing the component tree. The component.did-catch lifecycle method is used to implement error boundaries. Error boundaries help isolate errors and prevent them from propagating to the entire application, improving the overall stability of the application. How does React context differ from props drilling, and when would you prefer one over the other? Answer: props drilling. Props drilling occurs when you need to pass data through multiple layers of components by passing props down the component tree. While it works, it can lead to more complex and less maintainable code as components in the middle of the hierarchy need to pass props they don't directly use. React Context. Context provides a way to share values, like themes or authentication status, to components without explicitly passing them through props. Context is particularly useful when the data needs to be accessed by many components at different nesting levels. The choice between props drilling and context depends on the specific use case and the complexity of the component hierarchy. What are React hooks like useReducer and useEffect used for, and how do they differ from each other? Answer: useReducer. The useReducer hook is used for managing more complex state logic in React applications. It accepts a reducer function and an initial state, returning the current state and a dispatch function. It is often favored when the next state depends on the previous state and involves complex logic. UseEffect. The UseEffect hook is used for handling side effects in functional components. It allows performing tasks like data fetching, subscriptions, or manually changing the DM. UseEffect runs after the component has rendered and can be used to clean up resources when the component is unmounted. While useReducer is primarily used for state management, UseEffect is focused on handling side effects. Explain the role of the useRef hook in React. Answer: the useRef hook is used to create mutable object properties that persist across renders and do not trigger re-renders when they are changed. It is often used to access or store references to DM elements, manage focus, or persist values between renders without causing re-renders. What is the purpose of React memoization techniques and how can you implement them? Answer: memoization techniques in React, such as react.memo or custom memoization, are used to optimize performance by preventing unnecessary renders of functional components. Memoization involves caching the result of a function and reusing it when the input parameters remain the same. React.memo. It is a higher-order component that memoizes the rendering of a functional component, preventing re-renders if the props remain unchanged. Custom memoization. Developers can implement their own memoization techniques using tools like the useMemo hook or other caching mechanisms to store and retrieve computed values based on dependencies. How does React handle security issues like cross-site scripting XSS? Answer: React itself doesn't handle security directly, but following best practices can mitigate security issues. To prevent cross-site scripting XSS, sanitize user input. Always sanitize user inputs and avoid using dangerously set inner HTML unless absolutely necessary. Use JSX properly. JSX in React automatically escapes values to prevent XSS attacks, so prefer JSX over string concatenation. Content Security Policy (CSP) implement and enforce CSP headers on the server to control what resources can be loaded. Explain the concept of server-side rendering (SSR) in React. Answer: Server-side rendering (SSR) in React involves rendering React components on the server instead of the client browser. The server sends fully rendered HTML to the client, improving initial load times and allowing search engines to index the content more effectively. SSR can be implemented using frameworks like next.js or by setting up custom server-side rendering in React applications. What are React hooks rules and why are they important? Answer: React hooks rules are conventions and guidelines to ensure the proper usage of hooks in functional components. The main rules include: only call hooks at the top level. Hooks should not be called inside loops, conditions, or nested functions. They should be called at the top level of a functional component. Only call hooks from React functions. Hooks should only be called within the body of React functional components or custom hooks. Adhering to these rules is crucial for the correct behavior of hooks. Violating these rules can lead to unexpected behavior, bugs, or performance issues in React applications. Explain the concept of suspense in React. Answer: Suspense is a feature in React that allows components to suspend rendering while waiting for some asynchronous operation to complete, such as data fetching. It enables the creation of better user experiences by allowing components to display fallback content while waiting for the data to be ready. Suspense is part of React concurrent mode and can be used to handle asynchronous operations more gracefully. What are hooks like useMemo and useCallback used for, and when would you prefer one over the other? Answer: useMemo. The useMemo hook is used to memoize the result of a computation. It takes a function and an array of dependencies and returns the memoized value. It is useful when you want to avoid unnecessary recalculations of expensive computations. UseCallback. The UseCallback hook is used to memoize functions. It takes a function and an array of dependencies and returns a memoized version of the function. It is beneficial when passing functions as props to child components to prevent unnecessary re-renders. What is the purpose of the useLayoutEffect hook in React? Answer: The useLayoutEffect hook in React is similar to useEffect but fires synchronously after all DM mutations. It is often used when you need to perform measurements or manipulate the DM in response to changes before the browser paints. While it has a similar API to useEffect, it runs synchronously, making it suitable for scenarios requiring immediate access to the DM. Explain the significance of React DevTools in the context of performance optimization. Answer: React DevTools is a powerful tool for performance optimization in React applications. It allows developers to inspect and profile components, track component updates, and analyze the performance of rendering. By using React DevTools, developers can identify unnecessary re-renders, optimize component lifecycles, and ensure that the application follows best practices for performance. What are React portals, and in what scenarios would you use them? Answer: React portals provide a way to render children components into a DM element that exists outside the normal parent-child component hierarchy. Portals are useful in scenarios where a component needs to break out of its parent's DM hierarchy, such as when creating modal dialogues, tooltips, or other overlays. Portals maintain the normal React features like event bubbling and context, even when the child is rendered outside the DM hierarchy of the parent. Explain the concept of concurrent rendering in React. Answer: concurrent rendering is a feature in React that allows the rendering of components to be paused, prioritized, and resumed. It is part of React Concurrent Mode, which is an experimental set of features to make React applications more responsive. Concurrent rendering enables React to handle asynchronous operations more efficiently, such as rendering components while waiting for data to load. What is the purpose of the react.createContext function? Answer: react.createContext is a function in React that creates a context object. This context object includes a provider component and a consumer component. Context is used to share values, like themes or authentication status, to components without explicitly passing them through props. It's particularly useful for global state management or sharing data between components that are not directly connected in the component tree. Explain the concept of controlled and uncontrolled components in React forms. Answer: controlled components. In controlled components, form elements like inputs or selects are bound to the component state. The state is then updated through a change handler, and the component re-renders with the new state. This approach provides a single source of truth for form data. Uncontrolled components. In uncontrolled components, form elements do not rely on React state. Instead, the DM handles the form data and you retrieve it using refs. Uncontrolled components are often used when integrating React with non-React code or when simpler forms are sufficient. What are some strategies for optimizing performance in React applications? Answer: optimizing performance in React applications involves various strategies including memoization. Use tools like react.memo, useMemo, and use callback to memoize values and functions, reducing unnecessary re-renders. Code splitting. Split the code into smaller chunks and load them on demand, improving the initial load time. Virtualization. Use techniques like windowing or infinite scrolling to efficiently render large lists. Tree shaking. Eliminate and use code from the final bundle using tools like Webpack to improve load times. Concurrency. Leverage React Concurrent Mode for efficient handling of asynchronous operations. Explain the purpose of the useDebugValue hook in React. Answer: the useDebugValue hook is used to display a label for custom hooks in React DevTools. It takes a single argument, typically a formatted string, and provides a way to give additional debugging information about the custom hook. This information can be helpful when inspecting custom hooks in the React DevTools to understand their behavior or state.
Hey learners, don't just watch, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive into a sea of knowledge together.